Okay, I'm here with Steve. Hey mate, how are you?
G'day Mark, how are you, mate?
From Pegasus Planning, who is a man who actually controls and tells you how you make the most out of your money. And we're here to talk about self-managed super funds. Thanks for your time, mate.
You're welcome.
A lot of people talk about self-managed super funds. Everyone's a bit confused by it. So, me personally, at what level of super should I be thinking about doing my own as opposed to leaving it with someone else?
Okay, so going back 20 years ago...
I've only got 5 minutes.
Yep. Going back 20 years ago, self-managed super funds were quite often started with, $150,000 to $200,000.
Yep.
Husband and wife, typically. And in those days, you got the retail superannuation funds and even in the industry super funds, the fees were enormous. So the accounting fees associated with operating a self-managed super fund, it was worth doing that for those people who were that way inclined. ASIC has recently changed the way it views at what point you should start a self-managed super fund, and a lot of the financial planning groups and licensees have actually followed that advice and said,
What are you? 500?
$500,000.
That's your recommendation?
I can't recommend anything less because my dealer group and the compliance department says if you're going to recommend a client open a self-managed super fund, it's got to be $500,000.
Okay. So that excludes a fair chunk of the market.
It
really,
does.
doesn't it?
Now, self-managed super funds are a technical product. They're not for everyone. Right now, there's probably over 500,000 in Australia, and probably 400,000 should be, in my opinion, shut down.
So, hypothetically speaking, let's say someone had $250,000 in super.
Yep.
They can't do self-managed because
they can't come to me and ask for advice to set up that. Doesn't mean they can't go to their accountant or another provider and just get it set up.
Would you recommend that to someone?
Depends on their circumstances. It always depends on what they're going to do and how educated they are. Probably one of the biggest issues that we have with self-managed super funds in Australia is that as the trustees get older, they lose interest and the education level. So if you look at what's gone on in the last 10 years when residential property was allowed to be purchased in self-managed super funds, it lowered the amount of money that people were using to get into super funds. And that was pushed by a certain sector of the advice market, not a very ethical sector of the advice market in my opinion. So what it meant is people who really weren't very well attuned to what a self-managed super fund does and the risks associated with being a trustee or the director of a trustee company of a self-managed super fund and the responsibilities they have, they're not aware of that. So they would quite often go into a self-managed super fund. Somebody come along and say, "Oh, you've got 50 grand. Let's do that. Put it all on a 5% deposit on an investment property." Fantastic. The younger generation loses their job, loses their income as COVID, or has a reduction in their rental income, and all of a sudden the viability of that whole fund is an issue.
So you mentioned education before. So let's just say, again hypothetically,
Yep.
There's an averagely educated real estate agent who's got a little bit of money in the bank and in the super, and he hasn't got enough to 500,000. So where or what would he do with? What do you reckon he should do?
Well, it's not a matter of from a point of view of how much
Besides
you've got.
just coming to see you.
Yeah. Apart from how much you've got to allow for the rainy day scenario. So what happens is, and as a real estate agent, you know that not every property that's being rented is rented 12 months of the year, every year for 10 years.
Not for 10 years.
Yeah,
no.
there's going to be downtimes in rental income, and every time you change over a tenant, there's money that's going to be needed to be spent because that's what happens. So you've got to allow for that downtime. You've got to allow for a change in your circumstances. So if the viability and the cash flow of the fund requires you to actually contribute to superannuation every year, and you stop contributing, what happens? So
Okay.
you've got to have a cash buffer.
So there's no simple solution or simple answer to this thing.
No,
every single person is different.
Absolutely.
And everyone needs to go and see someone to get some advice.
That's the best place to start.
Right, and then go from there.
And then make up your own mind from there. So with clients with property and self-managed super funds with debt, or clients with property with no debt, and they've got other assets.
Is it a profitable way? Is there lots of people making money out of self-managed super funds?
Depends on, again, what you invest in. So this old term...
Are you a politician in second life?
Well,
what are you investing in?
Answer here. What are you investing in? So,
I don't know.
So if you look at the industry superannuation funds, they say, "Oh, our fund does 8% or 9% per annum." Well, what investment? That's generally, using the media term superannuation, is returning 8 or 9%. Superannuation doesn't return anything. It's just a structure, purely and simply. Your returns on your investment depend on what you put your money into. So right now, for those people who bought an investment probably say 5 years ago, they're very happy with the capital growth.
Correct.
And probably even with the increase in the rent. For those people who bought last week,
not so good.
It's going to be a long time for them to get any real capital growth.
All right, so if someone wants to come and see you, what number should they call?
1300 885 150 is
1300
885 150.
Right, and whereabouts do you live down in?
I'm in Clare Island Waters.
Okay, so local? Yeah, okay.
Local, but I've got clients.
Do you come to people's houses?
I generally go to see people because I like to see the lifestyle they're living to get a better understanding of their cash flow.
Okay.
Okay, so if you walk into someone's house and it's a big house, but you know what they do for a living, you might sit there and say, well, they may be spending too much money.
Could also mean that they're in debt.
They're big debts.
Okay.
Big flash.
Thank you, big fella.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, guys.